Yeah, you're right. The other aspect, it seems to me, is that in terms of the hospitality industry, is the now acceptance of not just Italian food, but other types of food. Because I recall 30, 40 years ago,
probably thinking the same thing as me.
Different.
Did you hide your lunch as well at school? I mean, we used to, for a while, I used to hide my lunch because, I mean, I was embarrassed. We'd have bibi and potatoes and cotoletta in the sandwiches. Now they're paying $35 for a sandwich for the same thing. And then when my Aussie mates used to taste it, so it's a lot better than a Vegemite sandwich.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And again, I think we're very fortunate in terms of our parents.
Oh, incredibly fortunate.
I want to ask you about your dad.
Yeah.
Because my view is that generation suffered a lot for our benefit, basically. But your dad, he came out here and he worked, as I understand it, in construction.
Yep.
And they built
he worked at Eildon.
Eildon.
He worked at Eildon Weir for a year and a half or something. And as it turned out, we were once again sliding doors moment. He came out with my Uncle Joe, who they eventually bought the house together, and they decided to go their separate ways. Uncle Joe went up to Cairns to cut cane, and Dad worked in construction here. And the idea was that they were going to talk to each other and say which was a better place for them. So Uncle Joe was up there, and Dad was sort of finding it a little bit hard to get work and was nearly packing his bags to go up until he found the job at Eildon. Anyway, he sent Uncle Joe a telegram in those days to say, come down to Eildon because they're hiring. Anyway, so he came down, took him 6 days to get here, got to Eildon, no work. So Uncle Joe then went and worked. They used to drop him off on Monday morning and pick him up Friday night, and in between he'd have to just cut timber, and he had supplies and whatever living in a tent. So Dad worked at Eildon and then came back down to Melbourne and kept working in construction. But he'd been a prisoner of war, so he'd had a really tough life. He'd had 5 years of prison.
I was going to say, he fought in Africa.
Yeah, he got caught in Albania by the Americans, given to the French, and then they shipped him off to Algeria, where he spent 3 or 4 years as a prisoner of war working for a farmer, and that, he said, was his luckiest time because he was working for this farmer in an environment that he was used to.
Yeah. So you could have gone to Algeria.
Oh yeah, Dad was when he left. Obviously, Dad was a terrific worker, and the French dentist who owned the land offered him a job, but he was betrothed before he'd left. But then when he got back to Italy, the lady who he was betrothed to actually ended up being married because they all thought Dad was dead.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was no communication, and when he got back, he had no problems with that. He realised that she had to move on with her life. Eventually met Mum and they got married. But even when he got married, the French farmer sent him a letter and asked him to come and run the land for him. But Dad decided to stay on.
But interestingly, though, I think that happened to a lot of people that were in prison. For example, a lot of them were sent even to Australia.
Oh yeah.
And then they had to return, but they came back. What I think happens is that once they left Calabria, they couldn't live in Calabria.
No.
They returned. Because it was
too hard. It was too hard. After the war, with Dad said, it was really, really tough, and making ends meet for the whole family.
Yeah.
He said, in fact, when he got caught by the Americans, he said that actually all his mates were very happy because they thought they were going to be sent off to America, thinking which a lot of them were.
Yeah.
But in fact, the Americans just handballed them to the French, and then the French.
Yeah. Well, they were lucky. Some were lucky.
Oh yeah,
my dad was actually sent to America. Others were sent to India.
Oh, okay. Really? Gee.
Yeah.
Didn't know about the Indian.
Yeah, and some were sent to Australia as well. And
the De Niro boys, all those, all that whole there. That's right.
Which are still going. And it must have been really a very difficult time for them when they returned, and indeed their families, because they
incredibly difficult. And Dad came out in '52, 2 years before Mum. So they came out and sort of had to sort of set themselves up.
And also, if your dad came out in '52, I think a lot of people don't appreciate it, but at that time, Australia was in recession.
Oh, very much so.
None of this.
He went around just walking door to door trying to find a job until somebody said, "Yep, I gave him a job in a market garden."
Yeah. So when you think about the hardiness of these people,
unbelievable.
Amazing.
As I said, we are so blessed in so many ways that they went through those hardships to get us to the point where we are today. It's all about what they did.
And the importance of it is because I guess what irritates me is that in the media, whenever they write about the Calabrese, they always say, a lot of them were illiterate, a lot of them were peasants, and etc. And they confuse a lack of opportunity with a lack of ability. Because if you look at what the people who came here, who were illiterate and who were peasants, and what they achieved here,
and yet, if you read the letters, and I got to read the letters that my dad wrote, and he'd left at grade 3, and you saw his handwriting and saw the way he wrote, you'd think, it's as good as any high school student here.
Exactly.
So they did have a lack of opportunity, but they made the most of what they had.
But as I say, my point is that there was no lack of ability.
No, not at all.
And that's demonstrable in my view, because if you look at what Calabrese have achieved in whatever country they've gone, right?
We have.
It's
I think
amazing.
we've added to every society in every part of the world in so many ways. I've been to New York a couple of times, and there's a huge Calabrese, and especially Boston. In Boston, there's a lot of Calabrese in Boston, where my grandfather went.
Exactly. And in New York, there's an American writer, Gay Deleuze, whose father was Calabrese. He was born, but he wrote a book, Under the Suns, and he writes about how these people who went from Italy to America, working in mines and manufacturing and everything, and how they suffered the concept of the company town, which he writes about, where literally they were economic slaves, because
pretty much
the town, the whole town was owned by
revolved
the
around the.
So you had to pay rent at the company, you had to buy food from the company store, and how did they cope? On the weekends, they did other work. In order to save money to send back to Italy.
Dad did exactly the same thing.
I don't think we'd be doing it.
No.
And so, to me, that's something that we have to be very, very grateful for.
And we should be proud of it too.
Absolutely.
Proud of our heritage.
Absolutely. Well, I think we live, as I say, I think we live in the best country on earth, in my view.
Yeah, I agree.
And multiculturalism is a great thing, but your heritage is basically who you are, and if you don't acknowledge
it hit home to me so much that day when I walked into that my auntie's house, and I sat down and I thought I could be home, and that's exactly how I felt.
Yeah, good. Now the final thing I want to ask you about is, because you must have been a Fitzroy fanatic.
Tragic, I call myself, to the point of going to the grand final this year and having to suffer the Collingwood theme song after the game. But look, I was. I grew up. I tell the story in the book that being the son of a migrant, Dad obviously no interest in football at all. All he was, like he loved his garden. And we as kids obviously fell in love with the Fitzroy Football Club, living so close behind. And I remember Ralph, myself and Michael went to every game in 1964, which we lost every game. In fact, I always say that we actually took the train down to Geelong. Dad had no idea where we were going. We were just going to the football, didn't know we were going to Geelong. As kids, we just took the train down to Geelong, went to the game, came home. Yeah, some Fitzroy tragic, I must admit.
Well, and that's the other thing that's changed. I think back in those days, football was local.
Oh, it was tribal. It was tribal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was
So,
tribal.
you know, if you lived in Fitzroy,
Yep. Well, see, that's people often ask me why I followed Brisbane. I said, well, I was in the situation where I hated every other team because it was a tribal thing in those days. I hated North Melbourne, I hated Collingwood, I hated Carlton. So it was either take Brisbane on board or sort of give away football. I couldn't go and follow any other team. So, and I must admit, it's been a pretty good ride. So,
a friend of mine had the opposite reaction in relation to South Melbourne.
Yeah.
And when they went to Sydney, he said, I couldn't.
Yeah, it actually, in some families, it nearly split them. It was so passionate at the time. I remember at the time thinking you were either the pro-Brisbane or the pro-Fitzroy bandwagon.
Because again, you know, people watch soccer in Europe and they say, oh, they're crazy. But in reality, back in those days, football was the same.
That was exactly the same thing in those days. Exactly.
And although some teams had more success than
That's true. A lot more.
I was lucky because I barracked for Carlton.
Oh, yeah.
We had a bit.
Well, I must tell you, I did go up to see the Carlton-Brisbane game up at the Gabba this year, so we've got one up on you at the moment.
Absolutely. At the moment, you're playing.
Yeah, no, we're playing right.
But it's good. All right. And the final thing is in relation to your hospitality. How long do you expect to be?
That's a really good question. My wife keeps asking me. I've had this one thing in my life that I've said that I will and I'll know. The minute I walk in on a Monday morning and I don't want to be here, I'll know it's time to give it away. Up until now, it hasn't happened. I am intending on taking a little bit more of a back seat next year. My business partner, Lena, who's a fabulous guy, and you know, I was so lucky to have him replace my brother. He's going to be taking a little bit more of the responsibility, and I will sort of take a bit more of a backseat role. But the adrenaline, the people that come in, the camaraderie, the customer base I've got, it's going to be a tough gig to walk away from.
Well, it is because it's an institution. Basically.
I always say I leave one home and I come to another.
And as you say, there'll be a lot of repeat customers. I know that for a fact.
We do. We're very lucky. We've got such a great base of regular clientele that it's just amazing. I still pinch myself every time I walk in.
Well, again, I think you've done very well. And you're the epitome of what I would call the real Calabrese.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That is a really wonderful compliment. I'll take that as I'll take that on board because it is lovely. I'm proud. People ask me, where you're from. I always say I'm very happy to call myself Calabrian.
And thanks very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and
it's been a pleasure for me, and hopefully people who see it will get to understand a little bit about.
I think we've, as I said before, I think we've added a lot to society all over the world, and I think we should be proud of it.
Well, we should be proud of it, but that's the other aspect of what I think is a Calabrese thing. Most of us really don't brag.
No, not at all.
And that's why people don't know.
We're very understated.
What the Calabrese have actually done. And part of the purpose of this sort of program is to get people to see.
I think it's fabulous.
The real Calabrese are not the ones you read about in the newspaper committing crimes. But they're the ones that have helped build this country into what it is. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.